fire, in fact, in the United States. But as an institute concerned with a variety of issues that sometimes emanate from and certainly involve the Middle East, we thought that it would be appropriate if we could gather around the table here and have a roundtable discussion, an assessment, as it were, of where we are 10 years later. Some of you may have been watching the lengthy, elaborate, moving ceremonies, commemorations that were held in the United States, but also in many other places yesterday. And there is, of course, a great deal of reflection on the part of Americans especially, but also everybody else, as to whether the events of the last 10 years have led to an end, or at least a diminution, of what was described in the United States in the aftermath of 9/11 as a terrorist wave against which it was important to make war. So what we're going to do this afternoon is give all of us a short amount of time to offer our various reflections. And for those of you that don't know our new colleagues, I won't offer biographical information, but I thought you might be interested in knowing sort of what they are working on here in Singapore. And after I've made a few opening remarks, you'll hear from Professor Robert Bianchi, who is here working on a long-term project exploring China's growing relations with the Middle East. You'll hear from Fahad Al-Sumaid, who is working on the question of discourses of democracy in Kuwait and the Gulf. You will hear from Gustav Boetis, who has been doing some very interesting work on oil and security issues. He just recently did a seminar here and has published a series of 4 Middle East Insights on our website on that important subject. You'll hear from Matthew Weiss, who is working on water issues and their larger ramifications in a region that is definitely stretched for sufficient water resources. Nazri Bahrawi from Singapore is working on the interaction between Islamic thinkers in the Middle East, especially Egypt, and Islamic thinkers in Southeast Asia. And Naveed Fauzi is working here on Iranian conceptions, changing conceptualizations of Iranian nationalism, and they will all have a few words to say from their various perspectives. And then, of course, we will open up the floor, as we always do, for your comments and your input. But let me begin with an attempt to offer a balance sheet. The title of our roundtable, as you know, is 9/11, a decade later, case closed, ? And I think that's one of the questions that we want to answer. Is it all over or not? And I want to focus at the beginning, in a very sketchy way, about to do a sort of an assessment of the U.S. war on terrorism as former President Bush conceptualized it back in 2001. And I simply, I'm going to be very just telegraphic about this. I've got a list of positives and a list of negatives. And I'll just throw those out and leave it to others to sort of try to assess, where the weight of the evidence seems to lie. There's a new book out recently, and a very good one from the parts of it that I have read, by Jason Burke, who is a journalist for The Guardian, who has previously written quite a good study of Al-Qaeda, but now he's written a much larger book called The 9/11 Wars. And at the end of this book, which assesses the whole range of things that happened in the last 10 years, he observes that the West may not have won the war on terrorism, but despite Al-Qaeda's successes, it has, in his words, avoided defeat. The West is clearly still standing. And if you heard any of President Obama's remarks yesterday at various commemorations, that, in a sense, echoes what the President said, that the United States has survived and stands taller than it did. On the positive side, what can we say? I think, first of all, the United States recovered from 9/11. It takes a while, but even the sites of devastation in New York are now, as we all can see, under renovation, and plans are well advanced to replace the two fallen towers with appropriate and perhaps better structures than existed before. That's one thing. Bin Laden finally was killed. It took 10 years. And one might have thought that with the greatest power in the world and a lot of allies devoting immense resources, that it should have happened sooner. A big opportunity apparently was missed just in the aftermath of the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, but the elusive leader got away from Tora Bora and lived to speak and occasionally to carry out further acts. But finally, he was gone. And that, I think, undoubtedly has to be a positive, even if you have, as I do, certain reservations about the way it happened and certain concerns about the negative fallout from that operation. But on balance, it's a positive. I think it's also fair to say that the United States and its many allies in the world succeeded in decimating Al-Qaeda as an organization to the point where it is not in itself, I think, regarded as it once was as the primary security threat to the United States and other Western countries. The original organization is severely weakened, and now the focus of activity has moved to the spin-offs from Al-Qaeda that exist primarily in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Arabian Peninsula, and in North Africa. Whether we can say in a positive sense that the United States and its allies are on the offensive against these spin-off organizations is debatable, but I think it's pretty clear that the very active campaign of military action and intelligence surveillance and so forth is very much in place. One might also conclude that, on the whole, the campaigns that were carried out in the last decade slowed the momentum of militant armed Islamism. Certainly in the 1990s, and especially because, of course, Al-Qaeda was active before 9/11, if you will recall, but in the 1990s and certainly after 9/11, there were widespread apprehensions, certainly among analysts in the United States, that bin Laden was basically going to be able to dominate, seize, manipulate a broad swath, a mass of public opinion, ordinary people in the Muslim world and especially in the Arab world. that I don't think has in fact happened. And so that's to the positive side. There's no doubt that a more capable and secure anti-terrorism infrastructure was put into place domestically, certainly in the United States, but also around the world. There was a development of enhanced anti-terrorism weapons, of which the Predator drone seems to be a particularly good example, which seems to have been quite effective in targeting wanted designated terrorist individuals, again, often with bad collateral damage, but still an important development, and one which